Hello and welcome to the Emily Rassam Show. I'm your host, Emily, and today I am joined by Monica Packer. She is the host of the About Progress podcast. It has over 4 million downloads thus far, and she's still going strong. She is a mom of 5 children, and she is the author to a soon-to-be-released book called Sticky Habits. And I'm going to read this part: A Woman's Guide to Reclaim Happiness, Ditch Perfectionism, and Create Habits That Last. And it will be released on September 8th, 2026. Her core message is, you are not bad at habits. You've just been using the wrong method. Thank you so much for joining me today, Monica.
I'm so pleased to be here. And frankly, I have to read my subtitle because we went through so many iterations of that I can never quite remember the wording. So I'm hoping it sticks in my brain one of these days.
It will. You'll get it down.
Yeah. With repetition, I'm sure eventually it will stick.
So the first thing I want to talk about with you is you're a mom of 5, former middle school teacher, podcast host, and now author. Which of these identities surprised you the most?
Truthfully, my answer to them is all of the above. Like I can't think of a single one that hasn't surprised me in very significant and layered ways. But I'm sure the most pervasive of those will be motherhood. Like just, it surprises you every day. And I'm sure since my oldest is 15, my youngest is 3, I already know better than I would have earlier, that I don't know anything. So I'll just keep holding on for dear life and see what the surprises are day to day.
I feel you on that one. And you know what? I'm surprised most of the moms I ask a similar question to always pick mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
I
do.
think it's, the most refining one for sure.
And I want to talk about your tagline, Progress Made Practical. What does that actually mean in real life?
I think so much of the self-help and wellness industry is, one, very certainty bound. So everything is very black and white in terms of, here are the exact things you need to do from A to Z in order to get this outcome. And they're not very full of nuance that can then be applied to a practical daily life, a real life that we have. And also sometimes they're just way too complicated. Like if you ever do a day in the life with someone who's in the self-help space, especially like personal development or time management or productivity, it's just like, are you a robot? Or is this just a very special day? Because, someone's advice for a morning routine can be like 20 steps long. And it's like they don't have another person living in their home. And the advice is very impractical. So everything I teach is meant to be both deep and practical. We go deep so then we can then go practical. But it really comes back to, let's make making progress in our lives actually possible with a real life.
And is this a one size fits all kind of thing, or is it different for every person?
Never. It's never one size fits all. Ever. And that's actually a big part of, I mean, you don't have me here to go on my soapbox about the personal development community, but I am in the personal development space. I mean, that's what my podcasting is, my coaching, everything. But it's not about, hey, here's a prescription that worked for one person, AKA me. So now it will work for all of you. That's a lot, again, of what we see in the self-help space. It's very much more of an intuitive way to learn how to self-trust again, to change your behaviors, to be able to shape your life in ways that you want and need, in ways that are right and good for you. That's the biggest thing I honestly teach over and over again is we have to let go of the prescriptions and make our own.
So as a mom, is there a difference between self-help and self-care? And how do you like to talk about those two topics?
I think a lot of us associate self-care with bougie kind of self-care. I don't know if people watch Parks and Rec, but treat yourself kind of variety of getting your nails done or going out to eat with girlfriends or a spa date or anything like that, bubble baths. I truly think self-care is caring deeply for yourself. And in most ways, it's going to be very practical. It's going to be very basic, everyday sorts of things. That comes back to the ways that we can help ourselves with habits. It's hygiene, it's movement, it's feeding ourselves, it's learning how to rest as a regular habit in our lives. It's having hobbies. It's those kinds of things way more than it is what I call the indulgent forms of self-care, which are still applicable. And, I just returned from the first trip that I've taken with my husband in 14 years outside of like I've joined him for a work trip here and there, where he works all day at a conference and I get to read all day or work all day myself. I just did that with him in the spring. I worked all day on his work trip and it felt like a vacation, but we just went to New York. That was indulgent. It was absolutely not something we regularly do. Again, we haven't been on anything in 14 years. It was our first trip to New York, period. And it still felt like a form of caring deeply for myself. But that trip wouldn't have done as much or been as effective if I had gaping wounds in the regular ways I was taking care of myself, those basic forms of trying to make sure I'm sleeping and eating and moving and reading and doing the things that help me feel like myself. So I think we got to kind of rebrand self-care. It's not just the bubble bath, paint your nails variety. It's actually far more basic than that and also deeper too.
I love that because usually when I hear self-care, it makes me feel really stressed out.
Yes. It's another one of those things too, where it's like, here's 100 ways to add on self-care. And for us as women, it's often like beauty coded too, where it's like, hey, spend more of your money on making yourself look like a woman that we want to see as our form of self-care. So
yes. And I'm in the trenches now. So I'm like, self-care to me is I got to shave
exactly
twice this week.
Yes.
By myself or something like that. And so you've built a career around dismantling your perfectionism. Can you tell me about what perfectionism really is and how it helps and hinders you in life?
Mm-hmm. Perfectionism for some people can be a coping mechanism. I think, psychiatry today could tell you that maladaptive perfectionism often comes up for people who are dealing with traumatic histories. But it doesn't just show up for that population. It shows up in a pretty vast and all-consuming ways, especially for women in a myriad of ways. But at the root of it, perfection is a misplacement of identity. It's misplacing who we think we are and our outcomes on what we can get done in a day, in our achievements and how we look, our appearance. It's a misplacement because at its root, perfectionism is a lie. Perfection isn't possible. Overnight success doesn't exist. All of the all or nothing cycle comes with a heavy price, and oftentimes all costs you nothing, meaning you land at the nothing camp from burnout or the other prices that you pay with your relationships, or your mental or your physical health. We believe a lot of lies with perfectionism. I think it's something that we too easily glorify in our culture, especially if you grew up in the 80s, 90s, and early aughts, like I did. You thought that was the only way to grow. You were given this one model of a way that you're supposed to be a woman on this earth and also someone who's progressing towards something better. And that's these extreme measures of basically being a robot, who has no room or bandwidth for anything every day to happen, like a sick kid or a disappointment or nonetheless a failure. Perfectionism is a giant lie. And there is not, I think, a good form of perfectionism. I know that there are cases for that, but I think it's just a semantics things. I mean, for me, like perfectionism in every way that it's taught, modeled, glorified, and also lived out is maladaptive in every sense of the word. It's not healthy. It actually forces us off this path to growing because we go to the self-blame, shame ritual of equating our worth with everything and then also expecting inhuman rather efforts of ourselves. And when we fail to meet that, we step off the path. And really what I think, if you could say, if there's an adaptive form of it, it's progress. It's learning that regardless of what the outcomes are, this is me. I know who I am. I know what matters to me. I know what my values are. I know what I'm interested in, what I like, what I'm passionate about. And that's who I am. And because of that, I can move on this path to bettering myself, to reaching for more, because those are good things, and do so in a way where I'm coming from a place of compassion, where there's room for failure, there's room for pivoting and mistakes, for human life, for things not go according to plan. A lot of perfectionists think that's only the overachieving kind that counts, but most perfectionists are actually the underachieving kind. People who are waiting on the sidelines. Either they got forced into the nothing side because part of the price of the hustle culture is, their own burnout and their own health and relationships like I talked about, and they land on the nothing side. Or they've been there from day one because they think the only way to change is the all, so why try because it's so unrealistic. There's some wisdom in that, right? But a lot of recovering perfectionists, I would say, or perfectionists are the lazy variety, the ones who think they're lazy, or they're procrastinators, or who don't follow through. And really, guess what, girl? You're a perfectionist. And so it just comes back to that very same root, regardless of where you are on the spectrum of overachieving, underachieving, all and nothing. It's a misplacement of identity. And if we really want to change, we have to be willing to do so from a different place and in a different way.
So taking your tendencies to perfectionism,
Mhm.
how did you get into podcasting, which is very scary for a lot of people, just talking and being in front of camera?
Mhm.
And how did you do that?
Never intended to get into podcasting at all. The way this began, I'm going to just back up and say a little bit of my story here because I have to set this up and how it all ties to perfectionism. I was a stereotype for the first 20 years of my life. I was the overachieving perfectionist that people looked up to, that I personally aspired to. I wanted to be on this pillar or this pedestal of goodness. And it started with good intentions. I just wanted, I've always desired for more, to be better, to try harder, to reach higher heights. I've always had that kind of personality. And I think in our core, in our heart of hearts, all humans like that. We really crave growth. That's just part of being human. But for me, I followed that all model because I thought that was the only way. And my prices were pretty heavy. As I was approaching my 20th birthday, I was dealing with multiple eating disorders and some significant mental health issues that related to them. So much so that perfectionism almost cost me my life. It was a very scary, dark, hard period, and one that forced me into the next decade of nothing, which I didn't know counted as perfectionism. I just thought it was, I was no longer willing to pay the prices I paid. I was terrified of paying those prices ever again. I didn't want to get to that place again. But in my head, there was this idea that the only way you achieve is perfection. So that costs you too much. We're not going to go there. We're just going to stay here. And then as I approached my 30th birthday, I had similar, very significant mental health struggles. Luckily, the eating disorders were better. They weren't healed. I would say much more healed now, 10 years after that. But it was more of just this, I truly did not know who I was. I was lost to my responsibilities. I could show up for my family. I was a stay-at-home mom of 3 young kids. I could show up for them, my community, my church, but for myself, everything was just on the sidelines. I was too terrified to try. But I luckily found a great therapist who pointed out to me that I was someone with perfectionistic tendencies, and I just about laughed in her face. But that spurred on many years of reflection and research about perfectionism and trying to understand who I was. And as part of that, I created something called the Do Something list. It was a way for me to push myself off of this all or nothing pendulum swing. I just want to get off of it. But I want to learn who I am again. I want to rediscover me. I want to know who I am. If perfectionism is a misplacement of identity, then I need to know, well, who am I in order for me to be able to try a new way of growing and changing. And the Do Something list is something I've made every year since. I'm on my 11th list. It's full of things that would never hit the front page of any newspaper. It's try 10 new sourdough recipes. This year, I'm doing a hobby challenge where every month I'm trying a new hobby. It's read a certain number of books or go on a certain number of hikes or go on an out-of-state adventure. It's take an adult ballet class or sign up for an oil painting class. It's all these things that I used to like that were big parts of my life and who I used to be, and I bring them back in. And it's also new parts that I've yet to discover, things I've always wondered about. This year, I happened to join a community play because of my Do Something list. It had been my list for years, and I kept not quite getting there. And then finally this year, thanks to the hobby year, I finally somehow joined a community play. And we just finished that a couple weeks ago, Fiddler on the Roof. But because of that Do Something list, I had to challenge that perfectionist in me that was so hell-bent on existing and controlling the ways that I was growing by either doing it all or nothing. And it taught me to make space with mediocrity. It taught me to be okay with a mess. It showed me it's okay to be a beginner. It's okay to try something and it not work out, or you end up not liking it or stumbling through it. And because of that, on my original list, I had started a blog. And that had only been because for years, I loved reading blogs. This is like the prime time for blogging. Everybody and their dog had a blog and everybody was reading blogs. And I loved reading them. I loved writing, but was too scared to put those two things together. But I decided to start anyway. And by the way, it was well past the time. It was no longer cool. Nobody was reading blogs at that point. I mean, a few, but it wasn't a success. I'll just say it. It wasn't a success. But because I was finally doing the things I said I wanted to do, and I was in this spirit of trying for trying's sake, I had the idea about 11 months into this whole experiment of progress outside of perfectionism and figuring out who I was, I should start a podcast. And then this was on a drive home from a trip that we went on, and our kid got sick. We had to leave all of a sudden, and we had a lot of time on our hands while we were driving 10 hours. Suddenly, I thought, oh, I'll just order the equipment now. And by the time I got home, I was Googling a lot of things, and then I just started the podcast. And the only reason I started the podcast and I've been able to now do it for 10 years is because I've had to practice what I preach every single day, that who I am is not based on how this podcast is doing, that I'm allowed to be bad at it, even down to like writing questions for an episode that I have coming up or an interview or sketching an outline. I write terrible outlines first before I write good ones. I was a terrible podcaster, I'm sure, for many years before I became a better podcaster. And I'm still learning all the time. If I didn't have the willingness to stay, to be moldable, to be teachable, to be open, again, to make mistakes, I would have stopped a long time ago.
I love that answer. Thank you
It
so
was
much
quite
for
the journey I
sharing
took you
that.
on.
It was. It was. And do you think that also this perfectionism, did it have an extra big effect for you once you became a mom? Because, you also have an identity crisis there, as every woman goes through.
Yeah,
Like, who am I?
of course. I think in many ways that, part of who we are easily gets swept away into motherhood just because it's so pervasive and for good reasons. Like, we literally need to keep these humans alive. That's truly up to us. And especially when they're so young, that's an all-consuming task. I'm not quite sure if there's a way around it. And I don't necessarily think that's bad. What I think is bad is if we stay in that place of it only being about responsibilities and survival. And if our sense of self is fully wrapped up in motherhood. And this is something that took me some years to learn, as a young mom, certainly, and still now to this day, that my identity can't only be mother. And that's for my kids' sake. If that's where the source of me knowing who I am comes from, I am placing an impossible burden on my children. Every day they have to prove it to me who I am and that what I'm doing is worthwhile and effective and worthy and that I'm this person that I want to be. I would be constantly placing on their shoulders. Instead, I've learned, and this is something that I've had to learn over and over again, that I need to bring myself to my motherhood. My motherhood isn't my identity, but I can bring my identity to my motherhood. And when I do that, not only am I feel like a more effective and present mom, I also think my kids get a happier childhood because they have a mom who's a real person, a mom who has her own sense of self, who has her own hobbies and interests, who knows about herself, who has other ways that she gauges what matters to her than just if they said their please and thank you to a stranger at the store that day or embarrassed me.
Do you think taking these risks is going to pay off as a parent in the future with your kids because they've watched you now try new things? And do you think it's going to inspire them to do that as they grow older? And has it happened for them currently, even though they're young? Have they tried some new things?
Yes. In fact, the reason I tried out for the community play is because I was trying to convince my oldest and my third kid to try out for it. And I was like, well, listen, I'll try out too. Like, I'll just do it too. Like, I didn't expect to make it or anything, but we did. And doing that together has been great because I haven't had to say a word about a lot of the things that I think they learned from even just this experience. But, times that by anything that they've seen me do and try it. It's not just the podcast, but, they've seen me go to adult ballet classes and like be nervous before and come back feeling like excited, but also like, wow, it's kind of embarrassing because I'm pretty bad now. Like, I used to be a really good dancer and now I'm like not, but it was fun. They get to hear me say these things without me having to directly teach that to them. But one example from this play, though, is, I was scared to death. I hadn't performed in 22 years. I quit performing because I was big into dancing and singing and acting. I didn't find theater until junior year in high school because I was doing ballet from 4 to 18. And I loved theater. I fell in love with it. And I found I was actually pretty good at it. Like, I didn't know. But I tried out for a university group for the musical productions, didn't make it, and then just said, that's it, quit. That's a cold turkey, like quit. That's a perfectionist thing to do for sure. Like say, well, I must be bad at it. I'm never going to do it again. So when I finally did it this time, I was scared. I hadn't sung a note by myself in front of anyone since my senior year in high school. I hadn't acted since that time. Like when they asked for the resume, even on your application, I'm like, what have you been in before? I was like, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat in 2004. Like that's all I can tell you. I had lots of dance before that. But they got to see me, show up to my day where I actually got a part, what do you know, where I had to sing in front of other people. And I didn't just have to sing, I had to be a crazy lady and running around the stage and trying to creep people out because I played a dead woman who comes back to haunt everyone. So it was like a crazy part. I was so scared. And they knew it. And I told myself, and I even told them, I'm just trying to tell myself I only have to have fun. And then when I came and I did my part where I had to rehearse and sing in front of everybody for the first time, I was in the hallway, pacing, trying not to throw up, felt so sick, not loving it, wishing I hadn't tried out for the play, came back out, did my part. And then afterwards, as the rehearsal ended, we were leaving, my oldest daughter said to me, I didn't know you could do that. And I said, I didn't know that I could do that either, because I hadn't given myself the opportunity. And she got to see that. And, and they got to see me have bad performances and good performances when we finally did it. But I mean, that was just one small example. And in me trying to live my life in this progress, not perfection way, and me trying to have my own identity outside of my roles and my responsibilities, I know more than anything, they see it than me having to just tell them that. And I see them trying for things all the time, even if it's just talking to a kid. I have a kid who's autistic. It's really hard to make friends, really hard. And we're always talking about, you just have to be the first one willing to be awkward in a conversation. That's what it comes down to, And so this, I think it transcends so many situations, but not that they're going to have perfect childhoods and never be scared or have anxiety. I have all those things. They have all those things, but I'm hoping they learn to try anyway and to try messily anyway. I think they are. I hope they are.
My kids are so young, we coerce them to meet new friends by paying them a quarter.
Go for it. Yeah.
If they can name the person's name and tell us what they talked about after.
That's brilliant. I love that. Wish I had that 10 years ago.
Right? My husband thought of that. It was not me. So how has your perfectionism and getting over the all or nothing cycle, then becoming a podcaster, led you to writing your book, Sticky Habits? And can you tell us a little bit about what the book is going to be about?
Sure. So just like the podcast, I never intended to be a habit person, to be like obsessed with habits and talking about it all the time and teaching about it all the time. For me, it came about because thanks to my work on identity, I made and learning how to make progress outside of perfectionism. I was making a lot of real growth in my life, and it felt really exciting and like returning back home to myself, and also like the world's my oyster. But I hit a plateau, and that plateau was because my life wasn't supporting that identity. It was good that I knew who I was, but if my day-to-day life wasn't making that possible, then there was a big gap, and that had to be filled. And in that moment, I had been being trained as a coach. I did a very intensive coaching training program that was nearly a year long. It's called Heroic Training Coaching Now, and they had a huge section on behavior design and habit development. So I learned a lot there, and then I was reading a lot of books. And I just kept trying to install these methods and really failing at them. And thanks to, having that progress, not perfection mentality, I was able to get more curious about it and keep trying and try different ways. But what really pushed me into this world was my clients. They similarly were making great strides in knowing themselves, but they also needed to sleep. They needed to move their bodies. They needed to rest. They needed to reflect. They needed to have meal planning. They needed systems at home that made them having a life, an identity possible. And we similarly, were working with the methods I had been trained in, and they were failing too. And that's when I had a series of moments that led to a real eureka of realizing these women are smart and capable. They are hardworking. This isn't a capacity issue, it's a method issue. And when I looked at these methods, they are all written and designed by men. And it's not to say that men are the worst, because they're not. I have a lot of good men in my life, including my husband, who's an equal partner, I would say, in my life. But it's to say that women's lives are different than men's lives. And in ignorance, really, these men created these methods based off of their own life and experience, and those that are predominantly experimented with men and researched on men, assuming in good faith, honestly, that it would be gender neutral. But our lives are different than men's lives. And as part of that, that's when I got into a lot of books and research about why that's the case. And it comes down to one big factor, which is invisible labor. And invisible labor is the mental, physical, emotional labor required to run institutions, from the household to your workplace, to schools, to church, everything in between. This work is often unseen, undervalued, and underpaid or unpaid. It's signing your kid up for all the sports, putting all the sports on the calendar, getting their uniform, and it's even down to who plans your work parties, who's doing the fundraisers for your local church or PTA, who's providing the meals for the sick people in your community. This isn't just about child rearing. It's all women. All women have the majority of invisible labor. This is transcendent of where you live. It's transcendent of your politics, your religion, your race, everything. And women carry the predominant amount of invisible labor. And because of this, we have less time. This is research backed. This is not just me anecdotally making it up. We have literally less time than our male counterparts because more of it is being used up by these institutional, like invisible labor tasks to keep them all afloat. By the way, the GDP would fall flat on its face if this invisible labor stopped. It literally would. Happened in Iceland in 1979. when all the women went on strike, and that included the stay-at-home mom to the secretary in the offices. Like, it included all of them. They all said, we're done for today. And the whole country's GDP went to a complete halt. This work matters and it's valuable, but it's pervasive. It's all consuming. It leads to a lot more interruptions. We're doing more in less time. That means we have less energy, which is, by the way, another word for willpower and determination and motivation. It's all just energy. We have, like I said, more interruptions. That also means we have more unpredictable schedules. And all of these methods are based in a reality that is not ours. Men have more time. They have more energy. They have more support because we're doing that. And they also have far more predictability. And so we can take what's good from these methods because there is a lot good in them, but we need to fill in the gaps to help us create habits that support us, that help us feel cared for, that help us feel like ourselves. To me, that's happiness. That's what happiness is feeling like ourselves here now in the systems we're in. And that's what I set out to create. And I've been doing it now for nearly 7 years. Led to the book
Wow.
too.
When we talk about habits,
Mhm.
what is one habit that most of your listeners or people you've coached have tried to build, but you would like to reframe for them or show them a different way to think of it?
Okay. Movement. Number one. The habit that should be number one is sleep. That's something like all of us need to prioritize better and probably first before everything. But the one that most women want to work on with me is exercise. I always say movement because it just feels like a more generous, like grace-filled way, because exercise brings up a ton of connotations and layers that we
Right.
don't really need. But yeah, exercise. And this actually goes back to like, how do we do habits differently then? Okay. If the other habits are too dependent on a predictable schedule and willpower / energy and time, and we have less of that, then what do we do different? And actually, the first thing we change is how we see habits. It's the internal deep work of reshaping what habits are and why they matter and how they're formed. Habits are helpers. Their only job is to support us, to help us feel like ourselves. And so if we're going to take that with a thing like movement, that means we are allowed to make our own prescriptions on what movement will help us feel like ourselves and what's appropriate for our time and our season, our circumstances, our physical needs, our mental health needs. I used to be a big time runner. I had to stop at 30, maybe 31 after I had my third kid and my uterus was falling out. I mean, TMI, but that's kind of what was happening. Mostly because I insisted on maintaining running the same way, because that's the way I had done it for so long. That's the way exercise looked like. You run 5 or 6 miles a day, pushing 2, and then, 2 kids in a stroller. And then once my oldest started going to, preschool or kindergarten, then it was still 2 kids, but another kid was like in a little school. So, and that's just the way exercise was. And when I was told by a doctor, you can't run ever again the rest of your life, I mean, that took me for a huge spin. Because one, who am I if I'm not a runner? This was right around the time I started to work with this identity stuff, and I realizing I was a perfectionist. But also, two, how do I exercise? Like, what else counts? Nothing counts. Nothing else counts, right? But I've learned the last 10 years, like through exercise alone, but also through every other habit. Like, if habits are to help us, then what kind of movement will help me do that? Well, for many years, as I was trying to figure this out, it was walking and bar. Like, I could just plie. I wasn't even allowed to do a squat or a lunge or a push up for years. Gradually, I got into like more strength training, and it helped my pelvic floor, and then I was able to do that better. But I still can't run. I still can't like jump around or do things that are intensive. So because of that, I get to design my movement in a way that's going to help my body. But also, the reason I exercise is for my mental health more than anything. I need a lot of alone time. I'm actually a huge introvert. I know that's shocking because I can talk a lot, but I'm a major introvert. I need all the time alone I can get. I could be alone the rest of my life, I'm sure, and be like, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good over here in my hole. So doing that means I get to design this in a way that works for me. And that's how it's had to be with every woman I've worked with on movement. What is going to help you feel like yourself movement wise? For some women, it's like, you know what? I just need to go outside and go for a walk. I need the fresh air. I need a minute to think. I just need to move and kind of do this walking meditation, or I just want to blast my music and like have a good time while I'm walking. Other women, it's like, I need to punch something. Like, I need a punching bag in my attic and I need to just go for it every day. Like, it's going to vary. It's going to be so subjective, as it should be. And so with that, and habits are helpers. You get to redefine what movement even should be, in quotes, for you, not because someone else says it needs to be that way, and design it in a way that works for your real life too, which it's allowed to change.
So, with these habits,
Mhm.
what are some that you have noticed can help free up time to do these things that help you with
Mhm.
your identity as like a mom or a woman or anyone in general so you have more time to focus on those things that you really want to do?
Yeah.
What are some of the big ones?
People are going to hate me because my answer to this is there never is more time.
Right.
And it's just how it is. And I don't say that to depress anybody, but it's just a fact. The past year and a half, I've had to wake up at 5 a.m. in order to write the book and being able and also be able to work out before my kids get out. Because that's my number one. I've had significant mental health issues in my life as I marked on, 20 and 30. And I still deal with some depressive episodes here and there, but to help keep them at bay, movement is one of the biggest ways I do that. And I've had to wake up at 5 to make those two things possible with my work and my children. I'm still the primary parent. I work like 3 or 4 hours a day, and I could easily work 8. Like, I know I get 8 hours done in those 3 hours. Like, it's just, you have to do what you have to do. There is no,
Yes.
you get down to business and get it done. There was never a day that the day wouldn't have gone more smoothly or been easier or been more effective or I'd had more time if I'd woken up a half an hour earlier or an hour earlier. Like, there was no limit. And that's in many ways reflective of the invisible labors that we carry because it is also endless and pervasive. Like, there's always more to do. There is never more time. And I say that I'm glad I had the option to do that. I didn't have a newborn anymore. I could work on being there, but I've decided that I'm not doing that anymore. Going into this new school year, I'm not going to wake up at that time because at the end of the day, there is never more time. It really does come down to I have to be willing to make trade-offs. In this case, it was me being grumpier. I mean, I tried to get to bed as early as I could, but life happens. And, I could be in bed at 9, but still not fall asleep till 10. And that made me grumpy because I only got 7 hours. And apparently I need like at least 8 at this age of my life and perimenopause and whatnot. But I've learned, I'm going to have to make trade-offs no matter what. And if it comes down to the trade-offs are me in perpetuity, there's certain seasons where the trade-offs need to be us, that's just how it is. It's part of being human and being part of a family and a household. But if it's always me in perpetuity, then there's a problem. And if women are wanting more time, I hear you. I want more time too. I truly do. But I think it comes down to you just need to be willing to make trade-offs that are your responsibilities in some ways. You have to be able to and willing to let some things go to use that same time for you. You got to ask for help
so
too.
true.
Yeah. Other
That
people
is
are
so
going to have
true.
to step up too. Let it go or other
Yes.
people step up. Yep.
Yes. And, your kids can do quite a bit of things, like here
Yes.
and there.
I've always
I
been
know
surprised what they can do too. My husband's always been the one who's been like, so-and-so can put their own clothes on now. I'm like, oh, they can? Like, or they can make their own lunches now. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Or they can start their own laundry. Oh yeah. You kind of get in that flow of just doing everything. And sometimes you just have to open your eyes and think, what am I doing that someone else truly, genuinely can do?
Right. And get past the stress of it not being perfect.
That's right.
That is a big one.
I will say day planning helps me get the clarity I need on where I can insert myself into my week, including rest or, something fun. Maybe the indulgent self-care too, here and there too. But yeah, and I don't like day planning. So I do it in a way that works for me, which is not the typical way. But yeah, there are some things that can help make it easier, but I don't think there's anything that will create that time. I wish there were. Let's get that magic button. I need that magic red button.
True. It's so true.
Yeah.
So as an identity coach,
Mhm.
what is one of the biggest shifts that you see has to happen before habits can actually change or become habits?
Okay, this is such a brilliant question. Perfectionists thrive off of shame. Shame is the most pervasive critical voice in their head. It drives everything. It pushes them off the path and makes them go on it and be like super hardcore diligent. Like, this is the way we're doing it. We're starting Monday and like you are now a slave to this goal. And then if you fail, then you're the worst and you're rotten and bye, I hate you. Like, this is the voice in our head, right? And that ties so much into identity because we equate ourselves with our failures. We decide that we are non-finishers, we're lazy, we're unproductive, we're procrastinators. We don't follow through. We don't do the things we say we're going to do because we have all this evidence that inner shame voice is highlighting for us. So if women want to, one, work on their identity and also as part of that, shift their habits, they need to learn how to identify that voice in their head and shift it to one that's more compassionate. And this is heavy lifting stuff. It sounds like a simple, just flip the switch, but it's not. It really starts with just awareness. And that's something I work on with every client for a long time. We just start with being aware of what voice is in your head? What's it saying? What does it sound like? Whose voice is it? A lot of times that critical voice is actually someone from our life, whether it's a mom or a teacher or an old friend or a sibling. It just starts with building awareness of what kind of voice is in my head and what is it saying. And gradually over time, learning how to shift that to one that's more compassionate, one that's more of your friend, one that's actually your real self in there that I think is ready and willing to encourage you and to cheer you on and also be truthful. Being a compassionate towards yourself doesn't mean you lie to yourself. It's not about becoming a narcissist who can never see the hard things about yourself or notice when you've messed up or you need to do better. It's not that. It's just more of giving yourself grace as you make your way forward. So that's really it. I think it comes down to that inner voice is really, really important. The way you see yourself affects the way you behave. The way you behave affects the way you see yourself. When you can notice that pattern, then you can kind of do the chicken and the egg, or you're working on identity at the same time as you're working on your behaviors. And habits help you do both. Habits can help you change your behaviors and also change the way you see yourself, especially when you're noticing and you're being aware of those moments where, oh, look, I followed through. Oh, look, I'm a walker, or I'm a meal planner, I'm a day planner, or look, I do the things I say I'm going to do. You are constantly rebuilding this identity in the way you see yourself alongside your behaviors.
It's so true. Every day is a new day and a new opportunity. And when you have these habits that you're forming, is it best to jump in right away and go for it, or take time and plan?
Sometimes circumstantially, we don't have the luxury of being able to plan. Like when we start the new school year, like there is no luxury of I don't know, like being like exactly all the habits we're gonna, like, I'm gonna think this through. I'm gonna get really intentional. I'm gonna design these all. No, like kids have to be up at a certain time. Like that just has to happen. Like it's going to happen. You have a big work project, like there's going to be some habits that have to happen during that time in order to make that happen. But for more habits than we think, there is space and time to be able to plan ahead. And the way we do that is not let me go on Pinterest and see what's the best kind of morning routine or movement or way to journal or day plan or meal plan. It's actually knowing you have more than enough information as it is. Like you don't often need more information on how to do a habit. It's more about getting clear on how will this specific habit help me and how can I design it in a way to do that. And as part of that, not just have an only ideal version. That's the only option. Like the only way I can move my body is if I go on a 60-minute walk a day. And if anything is different than that, it doesn't count, then I don't walk. Okay, or nothing counts. You have to have what I call a baseline. This is the smaller and simpler version of your ideal, one that can be with you on the less than ideal days, one that helps you be consistent. Flexibility makes consistency possible. So as part of you planning ahead, which again happens more than you may think, you have to also plan a baseline version of your habit so that you can have the flexibility you need to be consistent with your habit instead of it only being possible with an ideal kind of day. We don't often have ideal days, at least not all strung up together in a row, and baselines help create that and make that possible. So that has to be part of the plan.
What about then scheduling these things? Is it something that you say, like, I'm working out 3 days a week, and you would put this on your calendar and block out time for yourself? Or do you usually see people just say, I'm going to do it on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and fit it in whenever?
Yeah. It depends on the person, but for the most part, whether you're putting this as schedule or you have it pretty concrete in your mind, this is where, the good men with their great methods do help in this regard. Habit stacking is really important. Having specificity around your habit matters. That's part of the planning process. You get clear on a habit that supports you. You make sure it's an actual habit, not a routine. You design a baseline version to make it sure it's simple, and then you make sure it's specific. Those are the 4 S's that create the sticky habit matrix. So that's supportive, small, simple, and specific. Specific is where you have the habit stacking in a row. Even if you say, I'm going to exercise 3 mornings a week, that's fine. You don't have to have it has to be by, 7:3 to 8:10. Like I am exercising. It doesn't have to be so specific that way. But it does need to be specific in terms of what already happens those mornings. What's an existing habit or a routine that you can attach this new one to? Whether that's dropping the kids off to school, or maybe them all finishing breakfast if they're still at home, or maybe you want to do it before they wake up. What's an existing habit that you can attach this new one to? That's called a when-then pairing, or at least how I teach it. So when that's the existing habit, then the new habit. So when I'm done wiping off the counter, then I'll go outside for my walk. Or when the kids get up and finish their breakfast, then we'll head outside for my walk. That's just one example with that movement one we were using earlier. So yeah, specificity does matter, but it's not as rigid as we may think it needs to be, or as time blocking. I like to do my days more by rhythms than time blocking. I like have a morning and an early afternoon rhythm, an afternoon rhythm, a rhythm with my family at night. It kind of goes with the natural flows of things that already need to happen and who's around and when, and the tasks, like how I want to be boundaried with what I do when too. But it's not like my life is a robot. I'm a habit person. I'm a habit coach, habits and identity coach. My life is not all day, everyday habits. It's not one habit to the next. The habits are the touchstones that help me ground me during certain times of the day. And in between, I just live my life. You know, I have to-dos. I have random things that come up. I get interrupted. I get off task. Like there are things that happen, and that's life. That's life happening. The habits are just to kind of bring me back to what matters and what helps me feel supported enough to show up and to help my family do the same.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love the term habit stacking. It's really a great way to kind of stick something on with a habit you already have. I love that. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Oh gosh, this advice I think actually goes back to that first therapist I had who helped me see, oh, Monica, you're a perfectionist. And I was like, what? I haven't done anything for 10 years besides like be a mom and be a good mom or teacher, you know, like, and so, yeah, you're a perfectionist. She said something to me when I was struggling with this and struggling likely with like a mistake I made that day or frustration I had. And she said, why does Monica Packer not get to be human? And she kind of was giving me tough love a bit, which she was good at. And I really appreciate it to this day. But her advice there was essentially be a human, dang it. Like, it's okay. It's okay for you to be human. That's it. Like, that's the whole TED Talk. It's okay to be a human.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to use that. It's okay to be a human.
Yes.
I'll be thinking about that with my morning sip of coffee tomorrow.
Good.
And what is your favorite book that you recommend that you haven't authored, since now you're the author of a book?
Can you imagine if I recommended mine? That would be so funny and weird. No, I love to read. So I read a lot. For fiction, I would say I love Hamnet. If you're a mom, go into that one with forbearance, I guess is the word to say. Love Hamnet so much. But for nonfiction, I would recommend Fair Play by Eve Rodsky if you want to learn more about invisible labor and how 2/3 of the labor is actually internal, and how to better bridge the gap of disparity in your home with who's doing what and where and how. I think that's really helpful. And I'm really excited she endorsed my book. Eve is amazing. She's someone everyone should learn from. And and another book on invisible kind of like research. It's called Invisible Women. It's basically how women are left out of most research everywhere, from medicine to your iPhone to your seatbelt to even how buses are chartered in a city, even though women are the prominent like users of buses in cities. It will make you good and mad, but it'll also help you see like, we're just straight up left out. Like the default is man. And so that's why so much of what I'm being told in any industry doesn't actually translate to my life. So, you know, I actually changed the way my site used to be for the book. It used to say you're just using the wrong method. And now I've just gotten a little bit bolder and said like, you're using methods designed for men.
Right.
So let's just change that, because men are great and they need methods and they deserve it, but we deserve our own, and we deserve them to be written and designed by other women.
Right. And, you know, I've been having this conversation a lot because a lot of the studies done were for military purposes, and then we now use them in everyday life.
Yes.
And so it was predominantly men they were doing the research for. There's a lot of research now about how, you know, women aren't the same as men in the gym and all other places too. And I'm like, wow, I had never knew.
Yes.
It's a surprise to me, but not really.
I know. You're like, really? Oh, no. But then you think of it like, oh, yeah, that's why my iPhone is like too big for my female hand. And like Siri never responds to my voice. And like the seatbelt always has to be adjusted. And like, yeah.
Yes. And one final question for you is there anyone that you would recommend to join me on my podcast that I could have a conversation with?
But yeah, Eve Rodsky is awesome. I mean, you should DM her and be like, hey, I want to learn more about Fair Play and have my community learn. She's great. Oh, The Smallest of Joys, Diane Schiffer. She's the internet grandma on Instagram. She has like, I think close to 2 million followers, like this grandma. And she teaches you how to find joy right here, right now in the smallest of things. And it's a book that really changed a lot for me, but she as a human is just remarkable.
I will definitely reach out to both of those. Thank you for the recommendation. And I would like to express my gratitude for you joining me on the podcast. And also, Monica's book is coming out on September 8th. I will put Monica's information in the description below, so you'll be able to find that
Yeah.
for both YouTube and Spotify. And then I'll be tagging you on your other social media, so
Thank
they can
you.
find you that way too.
And I'll say it here for the people who are like me and they like never check the show notes, but they try to remember the name of something. You can find the book at stickyhabitsbook.com. Stickyhabits.com was $10,000. So I wasn't going to buy that domain. So it's stickyhabitsbook.com. And then my podcast is called About Progress. Since you're already listening to one, come and find me at About Progress. And I'm also on YouTube there as well.
Well, thank you so much, Monica, for joining me.
It was truly a joy. Thank you for your preparation and these amazing questions. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.